Okay, can you tell me your full name?
My name is Delun Horton, that's my married name, but I tend to go by Delun Gibby, which is my maiden name.
Great. And whereabouts do you live at the moment?
So I currently live at Penybrin, just outside Cardigan, but I'm originally from Maenclochog.
Lovely, thank you. Can you start by telling me how long you've lived here and what your earliest or first memories of the Preselis area are?
So I basically was born in Haverfordwest and raised in Maenclochog for 18 years of my life before I went on to Nottingham University. So yes, most of my family are from the Maenclochog area. My grandparents just had a farm just outside Maenclochog, both sets of grandparents actually. So yes, I don't know, my first memories, I guess it's just being at home, I guess, with my parents, running around the garden, and probably going to the play area in Maenclochog, Shop Sgwâr, having picnics in Shop Sgwâr and things like that.
Lovely. Following on from that then, can you tell me a bit more about the area when you were growing up? Maybe who were the important local people, what kind of work did the people do, social activities perhaps?
So when I was little, my grandmother, Madeline Lewis, she was quite a character in the area herself. She was the conductor of Côr Newyddion Da, which was quite a lot of the biggest Eisteddfods knew about us and did concerts all over Wales and sometimes in England. We even went abroad a few times as well, but the practices were always on a Saturday morning. So I'd normally go up there with my grandmother, and then my friends would be there as well. So we would do the practice, and then the younger ones then would get to go over to the play area in the middle of the village, or pop over to Shop Sarah and, buy some penny sweets or like 5p sweets. Back when Freddo was 5p or 10p, whatever it was. So that's quite a big one in my memory, basically. But there was also like the Adran, run by the Urdd, that was mostly run by parents in the community, including my mum. And then there was the Aelwyd when you were a bit older then. And then you go to secondary school, and then you start joining the YFC. So the YFC in Llysyfran, that was a big part of my life. So yeah, there's quite a lot going on in that sense. We used to go to Sunday school as well, especially when I was much younger, and then going to chapel and going to sing punk, and the chapel seemed much fuller then than it is now, and there used to be much more going on. And then every Christmas time with the Sunday school and with the chapel, you'd go up to the memorial hall, it was then, in the village. It was like a red brick hall back then. And I remember Christmas time, they would have, some boy in the village to dress up as Santa, and it was like a little game with the kids then trying to figure out who it was. And then, they'd give out presents and stuff like that. And I remember there was a New Year's Eve party up there once, and going up to some of the concerts that they held there with my grandparents then.
Fabulous. So what were the sort of big local celebration and events locally, and did you get involved?
I remember getting involved. The one that definitely sticks in my memory is Imbed. So it was like a community show, and the school, so I was going to my Clochog school then, and the school was involved in this big community show, and everybody, like literally everybody from the community and nearby communities got involved in this show. And it was just great, and it was telling basically the history of the Preselis through this show, and really like going into local characters that existed at the time. And I remember the village putting on a fair, as it would have been back in the day, in the middle of the village, and there was sheep there and horses, and everybody bringing up like, bric and brac type thing.
What sort of year was that?
Oh, I think it was like late 90s, early 2000s. But yeah, and there was a couple more shows that they did. Like it was an outdoor show on the village square. And, I think during the Turio event, somebody brought in a picture. They took a picture of the stage, like from afar, and you got all of these, 90s, early 2000 cars packed all around the square. And it's just a really lovely sense of community, really. It was just great.
Great. What stands out for you about your school days in Maenclochog?
So when I was in, Babanod or the reception, then we were in, the dosbarthine type thing. And back then, it was the old school, as it was for, hundreds of years. There was like a wall down the middle, so, the older groups and the younger groups were separated. Well, not really. There was a little bit where you can go around, but there was some sort of unspoken rule. And there was a toilet block outside then. That's where the toilets were. But you also had these two green sink buildings then. So that was class 1 and class 2, where the younger children would be. And I remember those buildings so well. They tried to make it really nice and colourful, so you'd go into the toilets. I know this sounds really weird, but going to toilets, and there was a big octopus and the ship and stuff inside it. And it was just really welcoming and just lovely. And there was a goldfish in there and a tank, and everybody would fight to, feed the fish.
Were there key events in the past that were talked about locally and celebrated?
I think quite a lot of stuff with the chapel were, celebrated if there was if a preacher was starting or if a preacher was leaving type thing. So I guess something like that, and also when there was concerts on in the memorial hall as it was at the time.
So anything that they look back upon as key events that they kept talking about, perhaps?
I wouldn't say keep talking about, but I know that my grandmother and grandfather would remember the fair in Maenclochog type thing. And we recently found a box full of cine films of my great uncle, Charlie Gibby. And on these cine films was something called Gymkhana that used to happen just outside Maenclochog, and it seemed to be like horse races or like an obstacle course and things like that. So we're just in the process of talking to the family now and trying to get more information about those events, but they didn't really talk about it before seeing the film, and as soon as they saw it, they're like, oh my gosh, yes, this went on quite a lot. Or there was a carnival up in Rosebush. That was quite a big thing. Trying to think what else.
So the events that don't happen anymore, but they're still
in living memory, yes. Yeah. But I think people have forgotten about them, and
until they had something to spark it off.
Yes.
Would your own family have had an interest in local history, the people and the places of the Preselis?
Yes, I think as they grew older, they definitely had more of an interest in possibly some of the things that they had on the farm that they want to keep for posterity type thing, or old photos, old maps. And
were there any stories that were passed down to you, maybe from your parents or grandparents?
There's quite a few. Not so much it's more to do with the farms and things like that. So for example, my grandfather told me before he died that his on the farm with them, they would raise turkeys. And they had many chickens and geese and stuff like that, and he said that his mother would be able to call down the turkeys and they'd fly down to basically meet them and stuff like that. But not anything specifically that would relate to Maenclochog as a whole.
Personal stories.
More personal stories, although they did have Maggie had a few stories about her brother Dylan Edwards, who was a comedian, about how he would scare people, like, you know, take them to the cemetery, be like, oh, you know, and then sneak up on them with some chains and try and scare them and stuff like that.
So was he another key figure in the area in his time?
I think so, yes. Like, he apparently did quite a lot of stand-up in, like, Tafarn Sink. He did quite a lot of Nos an Lawen. Like, my memories of him was more, we'd go over to see him in Arona, so I'd go over with Mungi, and he was very patient with me because I was very young at the time, but he would always play Tit-Bit with me, and I would make him play Tit-Bit with me then, because that stuck in my memory.
What about traditions? Do you know of any that used to be or still practiced in the Preselis? Maybe around harvest, you know, Calan Gaeaf or Christmas time, anything that sticks out?
Not in terms of like in the past as such. Like, I remember when I was young and on the farm in Blaenllwyd and bringing in the hay, and everybody would, like, neighbouring farmers would come and help out with that, and it was really nice to, you know, have a trailer ride or something, you know, quite fun for me and my brother. But there seemed to be more, again, a more sense of community. But I guess it does still live on, because I'm sure that quite a lot of the, you know, local boys and girls join in the silage and they contract themselves out, and that's basically the way that tradition is kind of carried on, really.
So are there any traditions that perhaps as traditions but they still are maintained now?
I think when I was younger there was more of us that used to go around singing Calennig on New Year's Day, possibly more carol singing during Christmas time. But to be fair, like, although maybe there's past traditions that don't quite carry on, there's definitely new traditions I've definitely seen grow. So I know that Clochog holds like an outdoor Christmas play type thing, and it goes around, and I think that's very popular with the villagers. And also there's a well just at the bottom of Clochog, St Mary's Well, and I think more and more people are actually going there and using the water now, and they leave little offerings behind. So I think that's a new type of tradition. Although, like, in the past, people probably would have done something similar, well, using the water to drink and so forth, but seems to have been renewed now.
So what's it like to live here today in the Preseli area?
Well, because I now live in Cardigan, I find always when I drive over the hills for work, or if I'm going down to my parents, it's always like a feeling of coming home and just being completely, I don't know, I guess just at home. I think that is basically what it is. And you feel completely relaxed.
How would you describe the community that you grew up in, Clochog, or maybe the general communities of the Preseli area?
I think it's just close-knit, and everybody's willing to help each other out. You know, not in a nosy way, it's not like people living on top of each other, but there is a real sense of community there. And it's just really lovely to be a part of that.
So what kinds of activities are you usually involved in? Social work or cultural? You know, do you participate much?
Yes, I would say I would. Any sort of events that go on, particularly my Clochog, because obviously that is where I grew up and where I've got family. So I try to participate in the events there. Even organising events to go there, such as taking Mary Lloyd around, for example, the Tufton Arms and Rosebush and the Globe.
Oh, great. What sort of facilities and services are in the Preseli area? What are the main things you think stand out? Well,
for my Clochog, some people describe it as the middle of nowhere, but also the centre of everywhere. And it is amazing. It's got two garages, a pub, a shop, and a cafe now as well. And there's also a public toilet. So there's quite a lot of facilities there for local people as well as people visiting. but then Crymych is probably the closest one, so it's at both ends of the Preselis type thing. And if you go down to the Gwaun Valley, then I don't think they've got public toilets down there anymore, but they do have, they've got Bessie's, which is just fantastic in itself. And of course Bryberian, I guess the community's a bit more dispersed, but there is a focus in the new centre, which I think is doing fantastic work.
Great. Can you tell us a bit about how the area may have changed during your time here?
In terms of Manclochog, there's definitely more there's more houses being built there, so I've definitely seen it change physically. And there's been work on some of the buildings, so the Memorial Hall is now a really nice, there's lots of areas to that function hall, and there's Steddfod there every year. I participate a lot with that, and I help with the presenting of the competitors, and sometimes compete myself. But yeah, I've definitely seen the change in that. It's clear to see that the community has pride in the village, and they want to put money into it, and they're happy to raise money towards different things. In Crymych then, again, there's a little bit more, there's definitely more building work, like housing estates now, more than when I was going to secondary school there, and just like the change of shops. But it's really lovely to see that actually there's a few more shops that have actually popped up, and that businesses are still thriving there. I think one of the main things though is that there's less agricultural goings on, if that makes sense. Because I remember when I was little, I remember going to the mart, and it was just a bit more, I don't know, populated maybe, but and I guess maybe I feel that there's even back when I was little, which wasn't that very long ago, but there was an even more bigger sense of community, and there was more possible like social events, and more people would actually go to the social events, whereas I feel now there's less and less people that are like willing to go out type thing.
So has the population of the Preselis area changed at all, do you think, over time?
Yes, I think there's an increase of people moving to the area, which is, it's good. Getting lots of variety of people, and that's fantastic. So I think that's definitely that's a change. But I think there's quite a lot of like elderly population, I suppose, that have now moved on, and they're from a completely different, almost a different type of culture to what we have now. I don't know. Something like that.
So how much do you identify as being from the Preselis area, do you think?
Very much so. It's a very strong part of my identity.
So you would say that you've got a very positive attachment to the area?
Yes.
Yeah. In general, do you think the Preselis is a welcoming place?
I think so. Like from my perspective, but I could be completely wrong. Somebody else might completely disagree with me. But I feel that in my Manclochog that there is definitely a welcoming feeling there, that if somebody moves to the area, they're instantly, whether they like it or not, they're coming into the community, and they instantly get welcomed into the different events, and they realise that there is this strong community there, and they will be a part of it, whether they like it or not.
Great. So, what does it mean to be from an upland area such as the Preselis?
I think it's definitely like the rurality of the place definitely becomes a part of your identity. So, for example, when you're growing up, you have to rely quite a bit on your community to provide those social aspects of your life. So, the friends that you grew up with, that was your social circle for a long time, because in my Manclochog there were no like buses really going out. You know, when you're quite young and you want to go places, I think there was one bus a month, and it was normally on one bus a week, sorry, and it was normally on a Thursday. So I felt that quite a lot of the young people, once they came of the age to drive, they would pass their tests really fast, because they were like, right, I'm going to be able to actually go places like to Cardigan or to Haverfordwest, and just have a little bit more independence, because you would have to rely so much on your parents to take you places, like if you wanted to go to the cinema or to the beach or to meet up with your friends. But at the same time, it was quite nice to be able to, you know, you could just, you know, walk places from like Lochog as well. You can see it as a bit of a challenge.
Moving on then, do you speak Welsh? How many people locally would you say speak the language?
Yes, I speak Welsh. It's my first language, and I think I'd like to say that it is still the majority language of the area.
Would you say that local culture was important for you growing up?
I want to say yes, but I think it's definitely grown a heck of a lot more since I moved away. So when I moved away to university, to Nottingham, and Nottingham was a beautiful place, but it was very flat and landlocked. So when I came home then, I really truly appreciated what I had here, and also I didn't really have much of a chance here to study archaeology. So when I was studying archaeology away, and you know, reading a book up there and seeing a picture of Foildrigan, like an aerial photograph of it, and seeing the archaeology that it actually represented, and it was like a penny dropping. Like I was passing Foildrigan every day on the way to Preselis, to secondary school, and you know, in my head, you know, it's just a mountain that they make us walk over every year for the sponsored walk. But to see it from the above and seeing that actually, you know, there were 3 Bronze Age cairns and the ramparts of an Iron Age fort, and the amount of history that I just wasn't aware of when I was growing up here, and then just gaining that, you know, that appreciation and then renewed passion and wanting to learn more. So that's why I came back, because I knew that the Preselis have so much more to teach us, and also to just offer people.
Great. So is there a heritage site that holds memories to you, and perhaps for your family as well?
I think probably Foilerir is the one that holds most memories. I know it's like one of the most easiest hills to go on, but like even from a young age, you know, my parents every now and again would take us for a spin up to the mountain just to see, you know, see the view from there, and walk up Foilerir. It takes you about 10 minutes to walk to the top, and then to see the sunset from there is just, you know, beautiful. And then on a nice clear day, you know, you can almost see Ireland type thing. And then I remember on some like you know, fireworks night. I remember like a couple of times my dad would drive us up there if it was a clear night, so we can see quite a lot of the fireworks going on. So yeah, that holds quite a lot of memories for me. And then obviously when I became the community archaeologist for the park, so I was walking up there one day, so I was monitoring the cairn up at the top of the Bronze Age cairn, because people sometimes move it and that can cause damage. But on the way down then, I went down to the right, because there's a recorded, well, Neolithic enclosure, they think it is. And as I was walking back towards the car park, I saw a stone in the ground, and it looked weird. It didn't look natural, and I picked it up, and it looked to me like an axe. And as it happens, I was going up to see Dyfed Archaeological Trust the week after. So I took it with me, and I said, I found this. I recorded exactly what it was on my phone and everything like that. And I found this, and I think it's a Neolithic like axe. And they had a look, and they were like, yes it is. And I'm like, oh. And I was so happy, because it was just so weird. It was literally on the surface as well. So
that's when you were looking for the national park then?
Yeah, for Pembrokeshire Coast, yes.
Great. And how long were you community archaeologist for?
About 2.5 years.
Great. And then you moved on to another role?
Yes, I became the manager of Coastal Uplands Iron Age Village.
Great. Following on from that then, which heritage site do you feel is perhaps the most important to the communities of the Preselis, if there's one at all, or you can think of?
It's a very difficult question. I mean, possibly not exactly a heritage site, but the pub of Tafarn Sink, like for me, it's like the unofficial museum of the Preselis. You walk in there and it's so democratic because you've got basically pictures of people from the area in there, you know, not only from like 100 years ago, but also more recent things. There's like a picture of my grandfather shearing a sheep up on the wall, and you go in there and it's just so lovely. Like I can only imagine for a visitor going in there, it's a completely different experience. But for me as a local going in there, it's definitely a part of our heritage, and you walk in and it's celebrated in such a, you know, it's not flashy or anything, but it's just, you know, it's there and it's on display and people can see it, and I just find it really lovely.
Great. Do you spend much time walking in the Preselis, and if so, where do you normally go?
Yes. Again, Foyle Ered is probably the one that we do the most just because it's the easiest. But I do enjoy going up Foyle Drigarn and also go towards Carmeini and Gorsfawr. I do quite like Gorsfawr. It's a nice atmosphere there, especially in a nice clear day, and sometimes the horses come down to that area as well, and it's just a nice place to just stop.
So can you describe for me what the views and the landscape looks like from some of the higher peaks of the Preseli?
So I guess from like Foyle Drigarn you get a really lovely view down towards Crymych and then up to Frenny Fawr. Especially if you go up there in the morning and the sun is just rising. I mean, I remember going up there once though, and it was very, very foggy. We were walking up and it was completely foggy, and then you make it up to the top and the sun it was beautiful and clear up at the top, and it was like you were standing on an island, and you can look over to Foyle Cwmcerwyn and you can see that as one big island just popping out, and then the peaks and the cairns popping out just from this like sea of fog. That was beautiful, even though you don't get to see the view, which is equally as beautiful. There was something quite magical about that.
Great. Are the local rivers used at all for fishing or sports or drinking water or anything else, do you know of?
So as I said, the Ffynnon Fair, the spring in Maenclochog is definitely used by some to drink water, and there's a spring in Mynachlog Ddu. I know people, I've seen people use that as well. I'm not sure if many people still fish in the rivers around here, but I know that my grandfather did used to, both my grandfathers used to fish from the Cleddau, but possibly not in the legal sense.
What are the most interesting features of the local physical landscape to you, do you think?
I think it's just seeing how the landscape changes during the seasons. Like because there's the road going over the road that goes over the mountain, like the mountain road, that's what I normally call it. And you know, going down to Maenclochog nearly every week, you see just seasonal changes, and it is beautiful to see, like when the heather comes out, for example, and it goes purple, and you just see the colour of the mountain change throughout the season. So yeah, I think for me it's just seeing the seasons through the hills or the mountains.
Are there any local stories or traditions associated with how the features in these upland areas were created?
Yeah, so there's a few stories that I know of. my favourite ones are the giants. So, for example, you got Carnydd, maybe on Owen, just up the road from Llwyn Hirion Centre. So those stones are meant to be basically the remains of some of the giants. And these giants were basically brothers that fought with each other over a will. And that's why you've got so many boulders in the area, because it's the remains of these giants fighting. And then some believe that Carningli, that she's a sleeping giantess. And then just down from her then there is also Carn Foy, that is an Iron Age defended settlement. But if you look upon it during sunset, looking to the west, it creates a silhouette of a man sleeping. And apparently this particular giant died of a broken heart because there was only 3 giants left in Pembrokeshire. So there was him and there was 2 lady giants. And apparently, for some reason, we don't know why, but the 2 lady giants decided to fight over him. And again, throwing boulders at each other. That's why there's so many boulders in the area, broken and all about. And they killed each other off. And he was left alone, and he lay down where Carn Foy is, and he died of a broken heart, apparently.
Wow. Are there any links between any particular sites and religion or pagan belief systems?
Yes, there are a few. So as part of my PhD, I actually looked at the neo-pagan community interacts with some of the prehistoric sites in the area. So some of the popular ones are Petra Ifan, Wynmawn, Gorsfawr, and up in Carmania itself. Now, most of the time, people leave very natural offerings there, which is, absolutely fine. If anything, it actually adds to the atmosphere of the place, and it's, nice to see that these places are still being used in a spiritual sense. But occasionally you do have, when people burn fires, for example, up there, it's not really good for the archaeology, possibly underneath, and also can possibly get out of hand, especially during the summer. But I think the majority of the pagan community, especially, I would say, possibly the local ones, respect the land and the site enough that they know what possibly, I don't want to say acceptable because that's just weird, and I don't want to take an authoritative stance on this, but I guess, yeah, they know that they shouldn't leave any trace, maybe.
So do you think your perspective on the landscape of the area is perhaps different to others who spend more or less time outdoors? I don't know, maybe, I guess my perspective of the hills are influenced quite strongly by the fact that I've grown up here. I went to school in Preselis, so each year we did, sponsored walks. So I feel very strongly connected to the landscape and to the area and to the communities of the area. And I'm sure that the hills have this effect on everyone that actually lives here, or moves to the area, or even just visits the area. It does have that effect. It will have an effect on people. I can't really define what it is, but yeah. Great. Do you have a favourite archaeological site within the coastal uplands of the Preselis, and can you describe it and explain why?
I would probably say Valdrigan, but I've talked quite a lot about Valdrigan already. But
why is it your favourite though?
It's because it was because of that image that I saw in Nottingham, and it drew me straight home, and it made me want to come back and share this passion that I now had for the history of the Preselis, and in particular prehistory of the Preselis, with the people that lived here. And so when I was a community archaeologist, I was very passionate. I wanted to start this project called Heritage Guardians, where I went out into schools and taught them about archaeology and took them out to see archaeological sites in their area, so that they were made aware of it. They were made of, firstly, archaeology as just in general, but also of the history that is very particular to them and would be most relevant to them. Because I always find that if it's difficult for people to engage with the past if it's not directly relevant to them.
Yes. Are there any other ancient sites in the area and what you know about them?
So Preselis is a classic one. You've got to talk about Preselis. What I find amazing about Preselis is the fact that it's actually ingrained in the identity of the area. So you drive around and you will see possibly in people's gardens like a mini little cromlech, or on people's like windows, a stained window with a cromlech on it. Or if you go to the schools, there's normally like a cromlech in the logo. So for that is quite a big part of the like identity of the area. I also think it's on the logo of the Crumlech Rugby Club as well. So it's amazing how much it resonates as some sort of a symbol for the area. Of course, there's Carmini as well. So it's the blue stone outcrop. That's also quite an interesting site in itself. And again, when I was the archaeologist, I had this gentleman that came to me, and he had a picture of it looked like almost like a compass, and they had found it and it was engraved into one of the stones at Carmini, and it hadn't been recorded before, and that was quite cool.
Wow.
And it was it's quite difficult to locate, but once you know where it is, you're like, there we are.
So have there been many significant archaeological finds in the Preselis area, artefacts and so on?
Historically, yes, and we've got quite a lot of like media coverage, especially because of the connection to Stonehenge. So most people, when they think about the Preselis, they're like, yes, that's the origin, that's where the blue stones of Stonehenge came from. So with Mike Parker Pearson, there's quite a lot of archaeological research that has gone into that. But there's also this new research, I guess, looking into the roads going over the Preselis, so like the Flemish Way, but there's now a theory that there is an actual Roman road that goes over it. So it'll be interesting to see what comes from that. But there's so much history just along that Golden Road that people have started calling it.
So the Golden Road across the ridgeline, is that correct?
Yes, across the ridgeline.
Yeah.
But there's so much more, like on the slopes you've got Neolithic enclosures, you've got Bydd Afanc, like the Passage Grave, you've got Hafod Tydfil, so that tradition of Hafod and Hindre. What else? Drovers Road as well, going across there. So there is so much history there.
Do you know of any connections between this locality and the other side of the Irish Sea?
Yeah, so like with the Golden Road, apparently that there was this trade link, and the gold from Ireland used to be carried across the ridge. That's one tradition. But I think there's for people living in this area, like it was a big thing. If you go up to the top of Cumcerwyn and it's such a clear day that you can see the Wicklow Hills, that was, people would normally come down like, yes, we've seen the Wicklow Hills today. So, that's quite a nice little connection. I know it's not historical, but it's just something that just tends to happen, I guess.
What about folklore then, surrounding some of these archaeological sites? Are there much folklore associated?
Yeah, so I've talked about the giants. I know that Vreni Fawr is meant to have had fairies there, so that boy was, he was out watching his sheep one day, and then he got distracted by these little people in like red costumes and followed them, and he went away basically to the fairy world for a long while, but for him it didn't seem that long, but by the time he came back everybody was much older. So there's that story.
So there's lots of stories about the fairies.
Fairies, yes.
Tylwyth Teg.
The Tylwyth Teg, yes. So we've got lots of like fairy stories, like Pentref, and they're meant to have fairies with, you know, little red coats, boots and caps, and, you know, come out during the full moon. You know, the Gwaun Valley is said to be, you know, full of witches historically. Pantlys and Brynach tried to establish like a religious community there, but he couldn't because he was driven away by demons.
Have you ever seen any Tylwyth Teg or any sort of creatures?
No, but there is this thing, some people call it the Preselis Silence. You go up to the Preselis and you walk along the ridge and you're meant to be able to hear absolutely nothing.
Wow.
Nothing at all. And some people then say that they feel as if they've been transported to a different time and they experience strange things.
So have you experienced that?
No, not any strange things. I definitely experienced the silence.
Wow.
And that is beautiful, but nothing strange that come with it.
Not yet, anyway.
Not yet.
So what are the younger sites should you feel also should be protected as part of the area's more recent archaeology, do you think?
I guess there are like certain sites that have become iconic, but I think they're protected in themselves. For example, like Tafarn y Bwlch with the tree growing out of the chimney. It's become such an iconic thing now. When you go past to see that tree, it would be very strange if it wasn't there anymore. But equally, it's a shame to see the house, you know, empty type thing.
What about any of the perhaps more recent heritage, maybe railways, industrial?
Yeah.
Are they protected?
In some sense, well, you've got, for example, the tunnel going out through Maenclochog and down in towards like Llwyddarth that way, where they apparently tested where they did test the bouncing bomb. So they're still there, and I think they're protected in some sense because I think bats live in there, but from like a heritage perspective, maybe not so much. But it would be good perhaps to interpret that heritage a bit more and bring that heritage to light to get more people to know about that heritage, I suppose.
So moving on, are there any songs or poems about the Preseli and life in it that you know of?
Yes, there are quite a few like songs and the one that sticks out in my mind just from what I know is the Can y Mochyn Du, the fact that was, you know, written by a gentleman from Eglwyswrw, and apparently he never intended to be a ballad writer, but it gained so much popularity that it basically caught like wildfire around Wales, and it's
an iconic song.
An iconic song, yes.
Are there any sports and perhaps other pastimes that people locally would be involved in or are involved in?
Well, there's a very strong rugby club in Crumych, so that's keeping that going. I think there's a tug of war team in Hermon. Yeah, I'm not really a sporty type of person. I think it's brilliant that there's an event called the Preseli Beast and also Ras Beca, and I think there's a Ras Mochyn Du as well.
So those are races then?
Yeah, fell races, so races that go over the Preselis, and I just think that's such a fantastic event, and one day, maybe, I will actually participate, but I'll have to train a bit, I think, before that.
What about food? How was food prepared in your childhood?
I don't think much has changed, to be honest. I think it's the same as it was now.
What sort of things do you normally
eat? Now or back then?
Well, yes. Then and now.
Well, I'm very lucky. I've got a husband that cooks extremely well, and he's half American, so he does really good southern style cooking. But I normally, my staple, the one thing I know that I can't screw up, is a cowl, and I follow Maggi's recipe.
And what does Maggie use as a... What meat does Maggie use in
ham.
cowl?
It's always ham. So you're going to have ham, potatoes, carrots, a couple of cabbage leaves, leeks, swede, peas, and then some stock then as well.
And is it true the cowl always tastes better the day after?
Always. It really does taste better the second time. But I do remember my mum also making homebrew. Well, she hasn't done it for a very long time, but I remember once she made a batch of homebrew, I think using her father's recipe, so my grandfather's recipe. And I remember she had it in the shower room for a long time, and there was just this wonderful smell that would come out from that room every time she opened it.
So locally, do people still make a lot of homebrew and brew their own alcohol?
I think so, especially from like the older generation and those that have a really good recipe. I remember a work colleague once, we were having like a party. It was a like retirement party for someone, and they brought a batch of their homebrew, and it was good. It was quite strong.
Going back to food then, do you think vegetables and meat and so on, how do they compare in taste now compared to in the past? Do you think there's a difference?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think it's quite nice now that there's possibly like less packaging than there was back. Well, because obviously I was growing up in the 90s and early 2000s, so there was a lot of plastic on stuff. Whereas now I think there's much more focus now on local produce rather than going to
Do you think that's become more of a when people are shopping, they're considering local more now?
And also they're given the opportunity to, I think. Although I'm sure, I do remember at one point when I was younger that I think somebody trialled like vegetable boxes, but that was before it was a thing. They would make a fortune now, I'm sure.
So if you had to pick one thing in the Preselis to show to a visiting friend, what would it be and why?
I think possibly Foel and then Tafarn Sink, Gorsfawr, and possibly Penrose Cottage actually. I hadn't thought about that one before. But so Penrose Cottage is it's a Wytheninos, or a one-night cottage, and it's just a wonderful tradition that obviously doesn't really exist anymore.
So what is a one-night house? Can you explain a little bit more about it?
So back when people could basically live on common land, it was their right that if they could build a house in one night, so they would get all their friends together to build a house, and if they could get smoke coming out of the chimney by morning, they could keep the house, and any land that fell within an axe throw of that house would be theirs. So I can imagine, I don't know, in my head I've always imagined, would they do it, in the middle of winter when they had more time between sunset and sunrise to build a house. So it would have been much colder and harder, I guess. But when they built the original house, it must have been something quite shabby, because it was just literally to get something together as fast as possible, because once they had smoke coming out of the chimney, you could always renovate type thing.
So are there many of these houses still in existence in the Preselis area?
Not in the condition that Penrose is. Penrose is looked after by Pembrokeshire County Council, I think by Scoton Manor, and but I think originally it was actually looked after by local ladies. I think my grandmother was one of those ladies that helped out. I think Kitty Howells was also one of them, who lived in Blindside, so the farm right next to Penrose. And my grandmother used to say that they used to have coachloads of people go there, and they would open it up and people would go in and see it. but that doesn't happen now. That
No?
hasn't happened for a while.
So is it open generally now, or is it only
No,
by appointment?
only by appointment.
Okay. So where do visitors to the area normally go?
I would say they go to the CUPHAT on the mountain road. So especially in summertime, you see it's quite busy up there. But also in winter time when it snows. But that's mostly local people from Pembrokeshire more than visitors. But yeah, you definitely see on a nice day that the CUPHAT up there is quite full.
So what type of visitors do you think visit the area at the moment? Do you think that the type of visitors changed over time?
Yes, in terms, I can speak from Coastal Uplands' point of view. Like, for example, before COVID, we definitely had much more like family groups, people that want to be like entertained more than anything and have fun. Whereas now I feel because there's been like a shift in people's views, they're much more aware about topics like sustainability, climate change. They actually want to come and learn about past cultures so that they can apply some of that to today's society. I feel there's definitely more people, like before COVID-19 we had more people from abroad, whereas now there's definitely more people, like more local people I guess, are actually enjoying their local area, and more people from within Wales enjoying, you know, places within Wales. So yeah, definitely more domestic visitors, if that makes sense.
Okay. Who would you describe as the ideal visitor to the area?
I think the ideal visitor is somebody that comes here, I suppose, without expectation. Or those that, if they come here, they know that it's somewhere quite wild, but also welcoming. I don't know, I guess people are always amazed when they come here, and they always come here without expectation. Because of that, they're like, oh wow, this place is brilliant, like it's out of the way, it's so beautiful. I think the most ideal visitor is those that come with respect as well.
So what are the biggest challenges do you think the area faces from increasing tourism?
I think there are a number of issues. I think one of the main ones is pushing house prices up. So it means that quite a lot of the young people in the community can't stay in the community. And it's not just house prices, there's also the problem that there isn't enough, I suppose, good jobs in the area, like well-paid jobs, so that young people are encouraged to stay. So there's a problem of, for example, for young people, where will they live and what will they live on? And those, I think, are the main problems. I'm not saying that tourism adds or detracts to that. It's possible that, you know, tourism could actually provide job opportunities for young people. But also, you know, if it does become popular from people, you know, popular for people from away to buy houses in this area because it's cheaper than other places, then, you know, although it's cheaper for them, it is quite expensive for the people living here. So there is a question of, you know, how to solve that problem. Like, should there be one price if you're a local and one price if you're moving from away? Although that might not be entirely fair, but it is a question that needs to be addressed in order to try and preserve, you know, or at least allow young people to have that choice to stay if they wish.
So what would you say are the positives and negatives of living in an area like this?
I think the positives is that sense of community, of getting to live in probably one of the most beautiful places, the freedom that gives you, you know, the fresh air, and feeling a part. I don't know, just something quite magical, really. I suppose the negative part then is the fact, you know, rurality is in one way very positive, but sometimes I can imagine it can be quite isolating for people. You know, difficult to get to bigger facilities, you know, like supermarkets and things like that. It does make life that little bit more difficult, but I do feel that the positives much outweigh the negatives.
Okay. How much do you know about the plants and animals that live in the Preselis?
Not much, I will not lie. Yeah, I'm not from a biology or ecology type of background.
Do you have a favourite plant, tree, animal, bird, fish or insect, anything that to you?
Actually, I went swimming in Quarry Pond in Rosebush about February time last year, and when I was swimming in there, I did have a wetsuit on because I'm not that I'm not that brave. So I went in for a swim, and I saw this strange looking fish, at least what I thought was a fish, but I then looked it up and realised actually it was like a baby newt.
Wow.
So that was quite cool. But I would very much like the wild horses and Preselis, and they're just such wonderful characters within the landscape.
So is foraging a local pastime in the area, or was it? Do you know much about that?
I know that my grandmother used to, she used to, well, as do we, go out and collect blackberries. So at both of the farms, Preselis and CUPHAT, I remember when I was little, my grandmother's taking me out and blackberry picking. And then I remember my dad told me that when he was little, that my grandfather's mother, so my great-grandmother, used to make elderflower wine and elderberry wine. And like that, I think that taste has stayed with them.
So do you go foraging yourself now?
Yes.
Yeah. And do you make elderflower?
I tried making elderflower sorbet. It was extremely sweet. I probably won't do that again. But I like I collected some blackberries with my mother this September, and she made a crumble out of it, and I decided to make blackberry vodka ready for Christmas.
Are there any particular areas people go or used to go to gather blackberries or, well, wimberries or anything like that?
I know some people still go up to the mountain to collect wimberries. I think some people go around like Rosebush and the Quarry Pond area, and there's a few wimberries up there. But no, like in terms of, for us, it was just mainly like along the hedges of the farms, basically.
So are there any names for plants and animals locally that are specific to the area, or dialect or anything?
I'm sure there are, but I don't know of any.
Okay. What sort of crops did people plant in your childhood? Do they plant the same crops now?
I imagine so. It is definitely a question that I would like to ask my grandfather and my grandmother. Yeah.
What about local superstitions? Are there any around sort of natural stuff like plants and animals or streams?
No, not that I'm aware of. Although my grandmother used to say that you shouldn't wear green. Well, for a while, she used to believe that you shouldn't wear green because it was an unlucky colour.
Interesting. How do you feel about conservation projects, and are you aware of any ongoing local schemes or plans?
I know the National Park does a lot of conservation work on the Preselis, so I know the beginning of the season they used to, and they probably still do, help farmers when doing controlled burns of the hills. So I think they tried to do it before bird nesting season. So towards the end, they tried to do it before the end of March, I think. So it's quite a spectacle to see, parts of the mountains, on fire. And as long as it's in a controlled way, then you know that it's good, it's meant to regenerate the land. It's when it gets out of hand then, you know, because if it's not done, it's more likely that you'll get a really bad one then in the summer. So it needs to be done not only to regenerate the land, but also to make sure that we don't get these massive infernos in the summer, like happened, was it last year or the year before?
So how are the burns usually received by local people?
I think for people that have known that it has happened like forever, that it's just part of the calendar of the hills, they expect it and they know what it is. Sometimes I feel either visitors or possibly people that have just moved to the area don't quite understand that tradition. They find it as quite destructive, whereas it's not meant to be destructive at all. It's meant to regenerate that land.
So what sort of challenges do you think the area will face in the short and long-term future?
As I mentioned before, it's getting young people to stay in the area and possibly bringing investment to the area. Although I think these are challenges, I think they are challenges that are now being met, like through this project, and also just through the resilience of local people, that they want to make their businesses work in this location. I think, you know, the cost of living, that presents a challenge in itself. You know, because of how rural the Preselis are, you know, it takes quite a bit of, you know, for example, just petrol or diesel just to get from A to B. Going over the hills, that takes more petrol, so it costs more to get to A from B, if that makes sense. Again, there is a housing crisis that needs to be addressed. And also, because climate is changing, we are going to see more burns, for example, on the hills in the summer. And how do we protect, you know, the biodiversity, you know, the big creatures as well as the little creatures, as well as the little creatures as well as the big creatures. How do we protect those and make them resilient against, you know, the effects of climate change? But it's not just, you know, biodiversity that's at threat, but it's also, you know, the livelihoods of people that live here, because obviously it will have an impact on, you know, where the commoners can graze their sheep, how many sheep can be up there, I'm guessing. There are a lot of challenges, but I think especially for those in agriculture, and you can definitely see the changes in the weather, and you know it's going to put pressure on those that are trying to grow crops or, you know, raise animals. So that is a definite challenge that they will face.
Is there anything that I have not asked that you'd like to mention about your connection to the Preselis area?
No. I would like to thank the opportunity of getting to be working on this project. It has been so lovely, doing the Tourio events and getting to share and listen to people's memories of their life in the uplands. And for me, it's been extra special because, as I said, it is relevant. It is relevant to me as a person that has grown up in the area. So to see people, you know, bringing in old pictures, and I know the people that are in them, or at least I know something about their family or something about the area which it comes from, and the way it just enriches our past so much, and knowing that we're all part of this collective past is just wonderful.